Welcome everyone again. Blender today is back. I'm in the same place. I'm trying to make it a bit more cozy. I'm trying things to make the sound not sound like a cave, but now that I'm speaking loudly once again, it feels like a bit empty. But let's do our best because there is so much to talk about. Actually, I wanted to start this episode. I already had it prepared, but it was just too messy. I was gonna be hiding under the table and I was going to have a sad coral. This sad coral is from La Amigos, the last episode when Coro is crying on the cliff. It was printed by Andy and it just reflects how many of us are regarding the last week. The Blender 2.8 branch no longer has Blender internal. Yes, the Blender renderer. The renderer that rendered that started everything, that rendered Big Bug Bunny and, well, not Sintel because there were some changes there, but Elephant's Dream, the first Caminandes, Llama Drama, and I don't know, so many other things. It's just gone from Blender 2.8. That's crazy. Most of it is gone. There are a few things that are left in order to make some texture stuff work, but yes, it is gone. That was not the only thing on the week. That was probably the most shocking for me because I love the Blender internal. But there's another thing that happened earlier last week, which is the removal of the Blender game engine. Yes, the Blender game engine. The reason why I am here, I don't know, sorry, I shouldn't get too sentimental, but I came here because of Frank in 2008, 10 years ago, and I was working in the game engine and together with Campbell, with Brecht and Chris Plash, and we worked so much, Benoit worked so much in making the game engine better, and this demo, Frankie, this video game, the only open game made by the Blender Foundation, Blender Institute. So yeah, I had a was very attached to it, but some things have to go. I'm gonna quickly look at the comments. Everything is going fine. Okay, there's no comment saying, I always check just to see if there's anything like the music is loud or like I can't hear you or anything. So everything seems to be fine. Next, removals, more removals, but merge. Actually, there were some merges. The timeline now resides somewhere else. Yes, there's bright things to this too. Well, everything is bright. The removal of the Blender game engine and the Blender internal is nothing but good things because it gets rid of legacy of work from 20 years ago, 25 years ago that has been around and tries to be fixed, and it's not the death of these aspects of Blender because they still live in Blender 279. This was only done in Blender 2.8, so you can still use 279B for anything, or C or whatever. If you're watching this video later and there is a C release, then you can still use it and everything will be compatible with it. And second, because it's not death, because you cannot kill something that is already dead. When was the last big prominent feature that was added for Blender internal or for the Blender game engine? Maybe the game engine was doing a bit better, especially because of the forks and everything, but the actual Blender game engine within Blender, like a big major feature, there were not so many lately. It was mainly on trying to get Blender to work well with other engines, but besides that, it's just, I mean, it just wasn't there. And there are so many options now. There's really, you can't go wrong with what we have right now in the market with the free engines like Real or Godot. There is stuff. So yes, this is live from Amsterdam. It's 9:15 p.m. on a Monday. So write your comments at me at Blender today If you want to leave some questions, we are going to answer it towards the end of this episode. First, I want to go and show some of the stuff. Not only talk about the removal of things and everything, but also the additions of things and some very promising changes that are coming from Blender 2.8 Code Quest. On last Friday, we did a live stream with the live, but it was only a Q&A, so it was mainly Q&A. But now, actually, I just compiled Blender, so let's look at it. How are the questions? Everything is fine? Yes, yes. Thank you, everyone, for the cheering, and yeah, it's just nice to hang out. All right, let's open Blender. I'm gonna start with, before going through the removals and everything, I just want to show something pretty awesome. This is the, well, there are actually many awesome things. There are changes in the UI. There's the Workbench engine, which is what we are going to see now. So let me make Blender big, because what you have to see here. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you noticed, but up here, sorry, I had to reset my user preferences. So I'm gonna make it a bit nicer here, bigger. Oh, the top bar is not themed. I'm gonna theme it quickly. Bam, there. Okay. And there. Save. All right. So yes, the top bar made it to Blender 2.8. It was merged, still lacking a lot of things, a lot of work, especially in, like you will see here, a big empty area that needs work too. It's not gonna stay empty, of course, just it's a work in progress. But also when you add a new, new tabs, for example, they are ordered alphabetically, which is not gonna be the case in the end. You want to order them by, I mean, you want to be able to sort them, right? To put them in the order that you want. Right now they're sorted alphabetically, but it's not gonna be like that, don't worry. Next, when you create new ones, there is this default workspaces, but actually this is just a copy. It's not like it's migrating the old screens that we had in Blender, but to the new system. So motion tracking will make it look like this, but workspaces are so much more than that. There is things that we can do to hide panels that we don't use. We can also have add-ons specific for that workspace. There are many things that we can make better with this. But okay, enough top bar. This branch that I just compiled here is a Workbench branch. Let's open a awesome file, the file from the splash screen by Daniel Bystedt, the Wanderer, which is available in blender.org if you need to download it, if you want to play with the same stuff. So this file, when you download it, it's in EEVEE. So what we see here is EEVEE. But there is another kid on the block. There is the new Workbench engine. So if you change the Workbench engine from the render settings, it's no longer on top here. The render engine is not per workspace anymore. Now it's in the render engine, also in the render properties. So you choose which engine, so Workbench, and then you will find here, this is all work in progress, by the way, just saying, but there is two shading, there will be more shading styles implemented, but for now there is the material shading and the solid. The interesting one is the solid, which is the one that is supposed to replace, is going to replace the solid mode that we used to have. Remember when we used to use 2.7? Well, yes, then. And before anything, cheers. All right, enough. Cool, next. Solid mode has different types of lighting. So the flat lighting is just flat. If, for example, if you're animating, you want to see the silhouettes, that's also pretty useful. But it's just an implementation test for the time being. There is also the studio lighting. Studio lighting is what we used to have, well, 2.7 has with the OpenGL lights, well, something similar. So if you're used to, yeah, it's the same way, but you could also have matte caps. Matte caps gonna be another kind of view. But something I really like about this new mode is that there is overlays that are being worked on, and some of them are pretty interesting. Like my favorite one is random colors. What is random colors, you would think? Random colors is random colors per object. So it means that if you're modeling, for example, you don't care about the color of specific parts of the model, right? You just want to tell which object is what. So for example, okay, the green object, now this is all one object, and then you can tell which are the other objects doing there. So that way is a much quicker way to find your object. So now you know, okay, this is not the same object, it's a separate one. And I think it's a pretty nice concept for, especially if you're doing modeling or technical modeling and you don't care about how it looks because now in Blender you have to set the color of everything you want to change, every object, you have to change the color in cycles and then the color in the cycles viewport. It's too much work. So if you have randoms, then of course that's much faster. You can also disable it, so then it won't use the random colors. But this random colors option goes really well together with the object overlap. So this option called object overlap, it shows an outline around the objects when they overlap. So when you select an object, it has an outline, yes, like we used to have. That was pretty common in Blender 2.8. But now even if you don't have them selected, you can see when the objects are on top of each other, so you can tell them where they are. This object, for example, is the same, so it doesn't overlap, but this one does, so it overlaps. So it's all these little things that adds these things to make it nicer. Like Jesse says, yeah, good stuff, simple quality of life, things are best. Or there is another experiment that is going on is, you know, in Blender 2.7, the normals will show like a regular color, or it will show like black when it's inverted, is the other way around. In the Workbench engine 2.8, there is this overlay that is called face orientation, which is basically showing red and blue depending on where the faces are pointing. So for example, this is mainly blue because all the faces are pointing outwards, except maybe some parts. This has actually inverted normals. And if we look down, everything is red, mainly because it's the other way around. It's just pointing in another direction. But it's pretty neat what's happening with the Workbench engine. It is worked on by Joran Bakker at the Blender, in the Blender Code Quest. It's part of the Code Quest. It's one of the targets of the Code Quest. So it's only gonna get better. This is literally 1 week of work. Well, one and a bit more. There was a lot of meetings involved in trying to decide what is a view type. So this, for example, studio lighting setting. It's or flat in this case. This is the lighting that affects the scene. But after this, in order to get to this, to separate the draw modes and the affect lighting and the overlay, like the random colors, we had to do a lot of meetings, especially Willem Reinisch and Jeroen. They were working on it for having meetings, and Brecht and Dalai, and everybody was having meetings there forever. So it's really a lot of it's a lot of talking and thinking about all the different possibilities to get this done. It looks pretty cool actually, in flat shaded with object overlap. Doesn't look like Blender. Anyway, I really like this option, so that's why I wanna show it to you. So you have flat lighting, flat lighting, studio lighting, and there will be another one with scene lighting, which is basically the lighting of the actual scene. So it's like EEVEE, you know, when you have lights affecting, so shadows and everything. Someone was asking, I mean, I'm gonna answer this stuff at the end, but I just sneak at the Taron. She was asking, will overlays be light sensitive? Well, yes, when we have, well, not yes and no. Some of them yes, some of them are not. But since the lighting is separate from the overlay, the lighting will have, for example, if you want shadows and stuff, you will have it there. Or if you want AO, for example, that's also going to be affected separately. It's a nice separation between the two. Next, we already talked about two new things that happened in Blender 2.8 recently. The merge of the top bar and the work being done in the Workbench engine, which is what I'm displaying right now. This is on a branch right now. I think part of it is already in Blender 2.8 official, but if you download it now, it might not be like with these latest changes. I think there was one small bug that the colors were not changing the same, they were not updating. That was fixed in the end. For the random colors to be, you have to be in solid mode. So when you see it in solid, then the random color will appear. And then it's just a matter of, yeah, adding the more objects that you add, you can just, they will start changing colors, which is awesome. And I already found a bug with dupli groups. If you have duplis, it's gonna be shaky a little bit. It's gonna start shaking a little bit. It's being worked on, of course, but it just looks funny when you have it there. You enable display random. This was fixed this morning, so you see, nice. Okay, enough. Let's close this branch. Yes, I want to discard the changes, Blender. And let's move branches. Let's go to the Blender 2.8, bin Blender. Okay, we are in the Blender 2.8 branch. What did I want to show? Oh, that, okay, I'm doing my animation here. That Blender 2.8 doesn't have animation yet, but who cares? Doesn't have actual animation. It has object animation, but not modifiers. They're work in progress. But I don't know if you can see down here, but I see, okay, let's say the frame start is here and the frame end is here. Oh, my keyframe is out of the end frame. What can I do? Do I have to go to the dope sheet? Oh, I will just move it right there. I just move a keyframe inside the timeline. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that like insanely crazy? Can I have people like cheering and clap, 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 clap? This is just insane. Okay, enough. Yes, editing keyframes in the timeline is now possible. The timeline has become part of the dope sheet. So remember, yes, the timeline is great for, it has a lot of functionality that is great. Like you can see the frame start and end. You can see the cache information. It's nice. You can see markers. You can do many things there. But the dope sheet also has markers, and the dope sheet also has the ability to see keyframes and so many other things that why not merging them? So we were talking with William and with the Joshua Long algorithm about making some changes in the timeline itself. Just for example, when you have a preview range that is different from your start and end frame, it should be more obvious. Right now in Blender 2.8, it was in 2.7, there's no way to know if you were in preview mode or not. So now there is this color overlay, which we are thinking on changing the color as having a slightly different, but still be obvious that you're in the preview frame range. Because if you're animating here in the preview and you change your start and end frame and you think that's the preview, when you render, it's actually gonna render the start and end frame, or when you send it to the farm, or when you work in production, then it's something that should be visible at all times. And we also have some other changes proposed. For example, the AV sync doesn't have to be there all the time. It's a huge use of space that you don't change that often, so it could be on a menu. The record button could be closer to the play buttons, like a tape player. that could be one thing to change. Then the new keyframe types, a few things can be in the menus. It will make more sense even there. This is the current frame. It could be between the start and end frame, right? Because it makes sense, start, current, end. Those things, such as the reshuffling a bit of the UI, could make things a bit better. And something that I have on my add-on on Amaranth, is it even working, Amaranth, in 2.8? No. Let's see. It's not even there. Oh yeah, it is. It's not working. Because it's looking for render layers. And there is no render layers. There is view layers. Pablo, what lazy Latino I am. I should update Amaranth to work with Blender 2.8. All right. Next. Timeline editing. Top bar. Workbench. Removal of the Blender game engine. Removal of Blender internal. Now all hopes are in EEVEE. Blender internal is far. No, Blender, no. EEVEE. Let's rewrite it. Rewrite that. Reward that. EEVEE is far from feature complete compared to Blender internal. And Blender internal is far from the speed that gives you EEVEE. So it's both. EEVEE is modern. It's easier to develop for, and it's not spread all over Blender. Blender internal it was all over the place. So if you change something in one side, it will just spread all over. Things like the modifiers we're using for textures in some cases. That's still the case, but it was just too much all over the place. There was a mesh operator called noise, that it will deform the mesh using a texture as a reference. So you can do that with place modifiers, and it's much better because you have much more control. It was an operator, so that one was gone, for example. Many of those little things are gone. There is a commit by Brecht that is authored by is made by Brecht, but it's authored by Ton, actually, that makes the removal. I recorded everything on video the moment of the removal of the Blender game engine, so there will be a video hopefully tomorrow in the Blender developers YouTube channel. So stay tuned for that. What else? Oh, on my personal agenda, I was trying to give it a try to making this to my I did a small mock-up in the UI. Among the videos, I also tried to do some UI stuff and usability. But basically this is how the editor's menu looks in Blender 2.7. You have a vertical list of editor types. So you have 3D view by itself. Then you have the animation ones, then the timeline graph, dope sheet, NLA. So now you have to know what NLA is, okay? UV/image editor, but the UV image editor also has the if we are here, if you go to the UV image editor, also has mask editing, for example. So it should be like UV/image/mask editor. Then you have the movie clip editor. What is a movie clip editor? It's, of course, now we know that it's for motion tracking, that it's not only motion tracking, it's also masking. So it's not correct to just call it motion tracking, right? But wouldn't it be better like if you open Blender and it's like, I want to do motion tracking? So well, nowadays you will go to the workspace called motion tracking, but if you will find in the editor something that says tracking, you will immediately go there. It would make it a bit easier. Video sequence editor, that's fine. Then node editor. Node editor is the worst because it's called node editor, which makes sense. It's very descriptive what it is, but the node editor is full of stuff. It starts with cycles, materials, then compositor, which doesn't have anything to do with cycles, is render engine agnostic, the compositor, but still is under the same name, node editor. Then there is a texture editor, which it's another monster by itself. Then there is in the texture editor there is also types of editing, but in the shading you can also edit the world and the lines for freestyle. In the compositor and you don't have that, but still there is a lot of functionality that is hidden. If you open Blender the first time and you want to do compositing because you heard Blender can do compositing, where would you go? It's nowhere here. Text editor, logic editor, goodbye logic editors. It was a pleasure to meet you. Then properties, outliner, the info is also weird. The user preferences is weird here also. If you already have it from the menu, and it's every software in the world has it in the menu that opens a window, and it just makes sense to have it there alone and not mix it with the 3D view. Like, how can you have the 3D view and the user preferences in the same place? It's also very confusing. File browser, Python console. The info editor, now with the new top bar, you don't really need an editor for this part up here. It's the info editor that has the stats. The stats will go in the bottom in something that is planned to be like a status bar that every software also has. It's a status bar where you can mouse over tools and it will show like a tooltip much nicer. Right now, for example, if you're using the knife tool in the 3D view, it will show you the if you're Shift F5 here. If you're, for example, using the knife tool, it shows all kinds of instructions here in the header. But if your Windows is small, it's just, you can't read, you can't even click and move around, you can't scroll. It's just you lose the information. So that kind of information could be at the bottom on something that is a bit more global, that you can also hide, of course, to save precious vertical space, but it should be always there, right? And you can also use it for the stats now that we have this header with all the tabs. You could use it for the stats of the blend file. So we don't really need an info window anymore. The other cool thing about the info editor is the fact that you can see the last operator settings when you pull down, but that's also so hidden, and it would make sense more in like the Python console, because what you see up there is basically Python operators that you can run with Python. So it will make sense to merge those two editors together. So my proposal was to unify that and just have one big menu that has all of this functionality exposed. So basically you could have the compositor into its own entry, which is could be like a shortcut to the node editor in the compositor view. Then the mask editor would be pretty nice if the image mask editor and the motion tracker mask editor, which are the same, but basically one works with images, one works with videos, and the one in the motion tracker you can patent a mask to a tracker. Yes, in the image editor you can do that, but it's just different ways of working. But maybe Blender could have its own mask editor, which is a merge of both, and then you could choose, it could show you tools depending if you have an static image, or if you have a video. And I asked the main developer of the motion tracker, Sergey, and it took a bit to convince, because there are so many corner cases. But basically, yeah, we agree that the functionality is duplicated at the moment. So maybe could be worked on in the future. Is no priority, but maybe could happen. 2D Paint. The 2D Paint is basically the image editor, but in paint mode, because you can make a new image and you can start painting right within Blender. You have all the brushes, you have everything pretty much, but it's just very hidden. So a nice way to expose that is a 2D Paint. Then the UV editor, which is exactly the same as the image viewer, but in UV already. So if you have selected a mesh, it could show you. It could even be expanded to have a bit more UV tools. Shader editor, it's basically the node editor, but in shading view. It's a shortcut. 3D viewport is 3D view, but viewport because it's not a view, it's a viewport. You can have many views. 3D. The animation list, I added the drivers because when in the dope sheet you can have a subtype. No, in the graph editor, sorry, Shift F6. Yes, there is a subtype, if I see it here, for drivers. And that is also very hidden. Like if you don't know, how do you know that it's in the graph editor or not? So it's there. NLA to nonlinear animation, just because there is space. Timeline, text editor, Python console, and then the assets browser is the new thing that is not gonna be, it's not added yet, so it's just a mockup. Outliner, properties, image viewer. If you're only going to see an image, see an image like F12 and just inspect the image, that is more or less data. So maybe it could be also in the data column. So this is a proposal. This is nothing, it's far from, there is not implemented. I just wrote a proposal and people were oh, I thought I replied to this comment. I still have it. If I log in, it's probably there. Anyway, it's just a proposal, so you can go and comment on it and give your feedback. More, the meeting notes. Today is Monday, so that means there is a meeting notes. There was a meeting at 6 p.m. like every Monday. Every other Monday is at 6 p.m. and every other Monday is at 10 a.m. in Europe, Central European time. Yes, CET or 5 UTC today. Basically, yeah, it's a quick meeting. There is nothing about the Blender 279. All the bugs reported so far are in add-ons, I think, so it's not even needed added for the current for the time being. Then some guy named Pablo Vasquez is gonna record. He seems to gonna record a new video log. Actually, it's this guy Pablo Vasquez already recorded the video. It just needs to edit it. I'm going to edit it tomorrow. I started editing today. I started like labeling the files with the correct stuff, so editing goes a bit faster. And then when I'm gonna make one about the Workbench, what you just saw right now, but with the actual developer. I'm gonna get Jeroen. Jeroen, if you're watching this, get ready because I'm going to ask you maybe Tuesday, Wednesday about the Workbench engine. And the third one, but I'm actually, yeah, King's Day on Friday is a non-working day here in the Netherlands because it's the birthday of the king, and that means wearing orange and yes, and just going around. So this is Amsterdam on King's Day basically. So yeah, it's gonna be busy. And it's also nice to see it. It gets pretty crowded. But next, I will try to make these 2 videos, maybe a third one. But I also want to work in UI stuff. The overlays for the Workbench engine is also something pretty interesting to work on. Or maybe even manipulators, or who knows. It's so many things. Then there was a meeting, another meeting today. There's a lot of meetings lately about the grease pencil. So Grease Pencil is getting ready now that Hero is out. I don't know if you haven't seen it. I mentioned it in the previous episode, but you should go watch it. It's on YouTube, of course, but it's also on the Blender cloud. And there's this video that I forgot to show. But in Hero, you can read more about it. It's a demo about Grease Pencil. You can see some more renders. You can even see some making of, some behind the scenes of Hero. And now that that's done, like the movie, the first ever movie to be made with Blender 2.8, in the open movie to be made with Blender 2.8 is done. So now Blender Grease Pencil can be merged into the Blender 2.8 branch. For that, it needs some tweakings. It needs some work. It needs to be more like the way of managing, for example, the palettes. It has to be more compatible with Blender. It has to be a bit more future proof, and it has to be more reviewed, basically. And up until now, everything was happening on a branch, so it's pretty fast way to develop. It's very fast. You just have any idea, just add it, and then you add it, and then you use it, and then with the team of artists and Daniel Martinez Lara making the movie, they can polish the tools. It's like, okay, add it, and then over time they polish the tool. But even then, with that polishing, it still needs some work to get in the Blender 2.8 branch. So we work with everything else, and also it's gonna have its own workspace dedicated only for 2D animation, so it's gonna be pretty nice. How would you call the 2D animate? This is a question. I ask questions towards the end, basically, but how would you call the 2D animation workspace? Would you call it, or how would you call the Grease Pencil tool if it wasn't Grease Pencil? How would you call it? 2D animation, 2D sketch, the sketch tool, or the cartoon tool maybe? Because Grease Pencil is gonna be split into two. One of them is the annotation tool, which is a fast and easy way to annotate stuff. And the other one is the full-on 2D animation system that it has. So basically, one is the whole deal, and the other one is just annotation, because sometimes you just want to write a few notes. You don't want to have the full... If you're adding a note in the compositor, for example, just like, hey, fix this note. You don't want to have all the tools for Grease Pencil there, so yeah, it's a mix. Next. Yeah, so there is some estimates there, but it's gonna take at least another month. Sergey needs help for the dependency graph. Yes, and there will be a task force. Basically, it's just migrating all the modifiers, I made a video about that too, by the way. It's in here, first modifier. So I went and asked Sivren Stuvel, developer of Blender 2.8 and also developer of Blender Cloud, about his what he was doing, and actually he was porting the first modifier in Blender 2.8. That's awesome, and I made a video about it because it was pretty exciting for me. It was like, it's like awesome. It's all Blender 2.8 is missing mainly is, among other things, is the modifier support, because with the new dependency graph many of these have to be rewritten. So the fact that Sivren is adding them one by one and just making them work, it's awesome. So there will be more coming, but I just wanted to make a quick video about that. Then before that, during the week, I asked Campbell what he was doing. So I'm annoying people. And multi-object editing, something I forgot to mention, and I don't even remember if I already show it. I didn't show it here live. Wow, so many things that happened. Multi-object editing. So basically you can... No, I mentioned it before because it wasn't a branch and I compiled the branch, but it wasn't... I didn't demo it here. So let's go to Workbench. And, well, any engine, by the way, is engine agnostic. But basically it means that you can have multiple objects and then you can select them, enter edit mode, and you can edit them. So you can just edit one, or you can even edit with proportional editing, which still has to be implemented to work with among other objects, but it's just amazing. It means that you can have two armatures or two characters. Imagine these are two characters, so you can enter in pose mode of both and then move it. Even though they're two different objects, you can animate them. So if you have a character and another character and you want them to, like, you want to snap one bone to the other, that can be done. That can be done with the new multi-object editing. So that's also in Blender 2.8, and it's only the third week of the code quest, and all of this is already in Blender 2.8. It's crazy. It's crazy. Then what else? So I made a video about that. You can go and watch it in the Blender developers channel. Then then the live Q&A, which we did with Dalai. So yeah, that's me. That's Dalai, and you can see us speaking for 1 hour about the Blender 2.8 in general, as answer his questions. So mainly an update of what happened, and then towards the end I was just asking questions, so people will like what we are doing now, but with Dalai that actually knows what everyone is doing. So back then there was 216 left. Let's check it out. The rocket, 203 left. So 13 rockets were sold from Friday until now. Wow, that's a lot. Awesome, we're almost reaching the 3,000 rockets, and there will be only 200 left. Okay, next. I think I'm done. There is Lekker Sunday. Oh, the Lekker Sunday. So Lekker Sunday, it's something that it's Lekker Blender, basically. Lekker in Dutch means something like delicious or tasty. You know, it's like it's lekker, it's delicious. So the collection of tweaks to the Blender interface and usability that maybe don't fit the asset manager or other parts or collections or like very task specific things, we call it the Lekker Blender. So it's just to make it Blender more delicious, but maybe the features don't belong to any specific part of Blender. So what Willem Reinisch was proposing is to get together on Sunday at the Blender studio, cook, make pancakes and make others whatever like stuff, eat basically food at the Blender studio for the developers and get these Lekker features included. So what are these features? There is a few that are already part of Blender, Blender 2.8 in the branch. So I'm gonna make the UI a bit bigger so you can tell the difference, but right now, so this is okay, this is huge, this is really big. But one of the changes, for example, is that now the division between the editors is a bit more clear. I don't know if you get to see it, but I mean, I have to make it really big for you to see it, but it's easier when you are working in it, you see it much more clear. So for example, you see it's rounded, the editors. So that means that when you are at the normal size, it's easier to see where is the division. Okay, so okay, this editor and this editor, so it makes it a bit easier to see, to spot the different parts of the editor. This can also be themed. It's in the color of that line. You can theme it. It's on the bottom, and then it's a color. So this is black, basically full on black. There is very obvious where each editor belongs to. There you go. So that was part of the Lekker Blender. Well, actually, if I make it white, you will see it there. So I think that helps a lot to tell apart which editor belongs to what. And then something that may have seen here, speaking of roundingness, is that now a property for the buttons was added, which is roundness. And this is something people have been asking forever. about, for example, the value button. So let's go to the value slider and let's roundness is 1. So if you lower that to say 0.3, now the roundedness, it's the same as the other ones. Well, let's do it also for the number slider. Let's put it on 3. See, now they all have the same roundedness. Of course, you can put it to 0 and then you have ugly square corners. It's like a Metro interface from Windows. Eek. But if you like that, you can have it. Then you disable the shaded, and then you really have a Windows Metro horrible thing. There you go. Really ugly. But also the number sliders don't have the arrows anymore unless you mouse over. So it's more clean when you see the interface as a whole. There, it's more clear. The lines the little triangles don't go in front or the back. They don't mess with the text. And bonus is that you can now, when you mouse over, you see highlighted the area that you're working on. So if you click on it, then you're editing the text. But also it's a hint that you can just click on the sides to make it change. So that's also pretty neat. There's a small addition as well. And then yeah, the roundness is for everything. So you can just make anything rounded. Like regular buttons, and you have a circular regular button. Or the tools or anything really. You can just make it full on rounded. I think today I posted a screenshot. No, I didn't. But with everything full round, and it just looks like candy basically. And if you combine it with a pretty preset, bam, all rounded. Okay, yeah, it's not for everyone, I guess, but it's pretty neat. All right, I'm getting close to the end, so I'm gonna answer some questions. Go. Let's go all the way up. 5, 4. There, here. What about merges? Will branches like MantaFlow, BetterCloth, and Fracture Modifier? Well, MantaFlow, I think it's very close to, like, it's being actively developed. The BetterCloth, I haven't tested that one, and the Fracture Modifier, yes, it's gonna be merged in Blender 2.8. Is there full driver support in 2.8? No, not yet. Have you seen the Armory game engine for Blender? I've seen. It's very famous, right? Armory 3D is one of the nice. I haven't tested it myself, but it's. I'm not into games that much anymore. I only tried Godot, and I really liked it, but I haven't tried this one. But yeah, it's working pretty well. It's another option to Blender game engine. What will happen to top bar when the window is duplicated? It's still there, I think. Let's try. I just happen to have Blender right here. Window. New window. And yeah, it's there. But I guess if you're full screen, or maybe there could be like a way of making it full screen, like actual full screen. Well, okay, it's still work in progress. I messed up with this. Next. Talking like he had time, Lord, acting like us mortals don't use 2.7. Yes, 2.7. I haven't used 2.7 in a while, so I don't know. I love all of you guys. Keep it up. Thank you. We love you too, Blender people. Any plan for freestyle? Yes. Well, plans. It would be awesome if it could be ported over to be used in real time. That's the whole goal. But I haven't heard of the developer of freestyle in a while. But not too long ago, actually. I have. I saw in the tool design there will be a new way to add primitives. I made an add-on that does something similar. I was wondering how I could show you how the tool designer to give them an idea. Well, I don't know which task you're mentioning, but the UI here, the tasks, they're open. They are like open to public. If you can go and comment on it, but maybe this is more like more official. But you can also go to right click select, so right click select.com, and that is the community where you can go and submit proposals, and then people will vote them up or down, and that way you get community support, which is the main thing, is the most important thing, to get the community to support you. And then with that you can say, hey, there's tons of people that want that feature, for example. I was having a go at Windows 2.8 this morning and it was crashing on attempting to show the file browser. Is the Linux version the best one to have a poke at? I don't know what's the difference now between Windows and Linux and the rest. I only use Linux, so I wouldn't know. But there were some crashes recently because of the there are so many changes in Blender that the data or the UI or things change and they have to be handled like with older files. Maybe if there was a timeline open, then it has to be converted to the new timeline, for example, or if there was, yeah, can be anything. So I would suggest you, if it's crashing, open Blender with -- factory startup, factory-startup, and then that will open Blender like with nothing, with the default, so that way you can tell if it's okay. Maybe my file, my user preferences is messed up, so maybe that will fix it. Or when you're opening a file, also you can try to disable the load UI button here, just to make sure that you're loading it with the current UI and you're not bringing some trash from the file. Maybe had a editor that had the compositor open and maybe the compositor was broken in this version, so that's a very safe way. So even you can even go further and just like have it super simple, just mix all the windows and go with like nothing, and open it with load UI, so that way you know you're loading and it's not even loading the viewport, just to be sure that is, yeah, just to be sure that it opens and maybe it's not the viewport that is crashing. Is there somewhere a list of new add-ons integrated in 2.8? No, that's too soon for the add-ons. The Python API is going to change a bit, so yeah, no, that's too soon. EEVEE will support animation. Absolutely. EEVEE is gonna be used for everything in Blender, for layout making or for play blasts or anything. So yes, animation support is. It doesn't depend on EEVEE right now. It depends on the dependency graph. So is the rest of Blender also. What about the new UI, please? I just talked about it. Will the new custom gizmos be exposed to Python so that add-on creators will be able? Yeah, I think there's work on that. When is it everything knows will be added to Blender? It's not with Blender 2.8T to AD, like to 80. No, it's later. It was supposed to be a target for 2.8, the first release of 2.8, but it's just too much work, so it will be added later. Let's leave Blender community here in the background so people see it while I read the comments. For the UI, I may suggest taking the properties panel icons more distinct, and also for aesthetics, make the background buttons invisible and make them light up when they're selected. Yeah, like outline only. That's a nice idea. I wanted to try something like that. I was even playing on my version of my proposals. I updated it a little bit. I made a panel, and then a panel with a checkbox, and also a panel with the presets. This is an idea that William was playing with. Is, for example, when you have Blender and you have the dimension settings, for example, always every time there is a preset for something, it's on top of the panel, so it's like the first thing in the panel. And maybe if this was here on the side, you will save space, so because then it means that you have a collapsed panel, and then you can just choose 1080p or samples, blah blah, and then you can choose the presets more much faster. So that's a pretty nice idea that William was proposing. So I think it should go maybe in the new Lekker Sunday, next Sunday or so, or later. What is the Workbench engine? I think I mentioned it already. The Workbench engine is the engine that will replace solid mode or sculpt mode, or basically the solid mode in Blender 2.7 and the matte caps and everything. With the newer under the hood is gonna use, it's gonna be like a stripped down EEVEE, for example. So that way it's fast for animation. It should be as fast as 2.7 or faster even, but it could also have these new tricks of the new OpenGL stuff that will make it nicer. For example, like the random colors and everything. It's a bunch of overlays. So yeah, that's the Workbench engine. Is all over. It's for working, for like what you're gonna use when you work. Because when you're modeling, like I'm modeling this, I don't want to have EEVEE all the time with the reflections and stuff. That's confusing. Maybe you just want to see the wireframe on top of the model in solid in different colors like the one we saw. That should be enough for most of the things. What about Summit of Code? There is in the meeting notes, there is something about the Summit of Code. There is even a link regarding that. 6 accepted students. So yes, 6 people will be working on the Summit of Code, and the projects seem to be, I just didn't know, Bevel modifier improvements, implementing a hair shader for cycles. Oh, wouldn't that be awesome? Many light sampling. This project will implement the following paper: important sampling of many lights with adaptive tree splitting. Wow. Further development of cycles for volume rendering, maybe making it as fast as no. Blender internal? No. But awesome improvements on cycles. For those that were saying, no, because Blender EEVEE is gonna kill cycles. No. The next, after the internal died, then the next one is cycles. No. Cycles is getting all the love in the world. There's no replacement for cycles. EEVEE, I mean, real-time graphics are not that far. No, not even in that Unreal Engine demo. It's not as close as you can render. Just watch a Pixar movie and watch a Unreal demo. They don't match. Blender NPR line rendering improvement. That would be amazing. Awesome. And optimizing exporting and importing of STL and blah. Boring. No, okay, it's not boring. It's for 3D printing, I guess, pretty nice STL and but the NPR, I'm very excited about that. The community of NPR is huge, non-photorealistic rendering. So awesome, very happy. Even more happy than, well, actually hair shading and cycles is also pretty neat. Pretty neat. Is there a possibility of what is possible to define custom fonts for the text in the sequencer? No, it's not currently possible. There was someone that was trying to implement it, but I don't think it got to any patches that are in trunk, but it was actually proposed. Will the top bar of OS be removed like Photoshop? We actually, that is in my proposal. It was to be removed, just to have Blender internally have this, but it's not a priority right now. It's a lot of work, but it will be nice. But the thing is that Photoshop only has to work with Windows and Mac, and Blender has to work with Windows, Mac, and Linux. If node editors split between the different models, materials editors at least, will we still need the all surface volume displacement panels in the material properties? Will we still need the all surface volume displacement? Yes, I think so. That wouldn't go away. That's an easier way to set the things, the material. Your menu group is nice and clear. Thank you. Hello, Jeroen, you're there. Well, maybe you were there a few 20 minutes ago. Do you use the video editing slog in Blender, the sequence editor? No, I try, but just no. The sequencer editor is a bit behind. It's just a bit slow, and there's nobody that wants to work on it right now at the studio, so I can't just ask features. They are busy with Blender 2.8. It's just a lot of work. Next, Blender color orange because of Amsterdam. Because of the Netherlands. Any news on Metropolitan line transport? No, I don't, not that I know. Maybe you can ask in the next live stream with from the studio, which is not this Friday but the one Friday after. Gris toolkit. As far as the image viewer goes, we can't easily see multiple images at once in Blender. It would be nice to have functionality like pure ref. I will have to go with it. In the new way multiple editing works, I can share a modifier with two objects at the same time. Well, yeah, you can do that already in Blender. You don't need the new multi modifier. You can just select, you add a modifier like cloth, select both, and then Control L modifiers. Bam, and then that's it. It gets shared to all the objects. Control L. It's full of options. Next. How would your editor selection mockup handle custom node trees like animation nodes or Sherlock? It doesn't handle it. It's basically, if this panel gets available for Python, then maybe the add-ons like animation nodes could add its own entries. That would be pretty nice. What do you think about UI layers for Grease Pencil? With animation, it will be possible to do UI tutorial animations and stuff. UI layers for Grease Pencil. Not sure what you mean. Will the flat shading in the overlay show textures? Yes, that's one of the options, to show the textures. Will the shadows be adjustable? I think so, but no, the idea is to give as little options as possible and make it nice always. Yeah, that's a big challenge, but that's the goal. You should integrate a storyboard editor for us animator in Grease Pencil. Yeah, maybe it could be an add-on. In 2.8, when is local mode going to be re-implemented? Soon, but it's not priority right now. Like right now, in the 3rd week of the code quest. It's gonna be, of course, local view. It's not going anywhere. It's very important, but it's just not there yet. What improvements the new dependency graph brings to 2.8? Speed, having it well, all the cycles issues that you have in 2.7, they should be gone. You can have 2 windows with 2 different times, each one, or different workspaces, and work in the same data, but with different overrides. Many improvements. Grease Pencil Workspace could be 2 on tools. Needs a Grease Pencil, Greaser. Okay, this is jumping. Let's see. Will there be very different the final design of the interface in 2.8? Yes. Long term, is there any plans? Yeah, it will be different because the workspaces have to implement it. Right now, this is basically using the workspaces like using, yeah, it's gonna change basically. It's using the old screens. Long terms, is there any plans to work on more advanced motion tracking mockup system? No. Is wireframe in EEVEE? I haven't seen. No, it's not there yet. Well, it's in top of the objects, but not anymore. Not anything else. Can you bake procedural displacement maps in EEVEE like you can in Blender internal? No. Will Rainish get rid of the pointless columns with the text resolution? Just look a bit cleaner without them. That's a good proposal. Thanks for making Blender even better. What about bevel shader in 2.8? It's there, the bevel shader for cycles. What else? Do you have any news on the rockets? Yes, they are in production. There will be, you should get an email soonish. Otherwise, I'm gonna poke Francesco to send you. What about branches like Blender Cloth, Fracture Modifier, and Manta Flow? I already mentioned Fracture Modifier is going in. Manta Flow, that's a really good chance. Better Cloth, I am not sure. I haven't tried it even. Do you have an idea if there is a possibility that Blender will create a more CAD version in the future? Possibilities are endless, right? It's open source, so anybody that can and wants to make one should. But I don't think the Blender Institute is currently more focused on like want to make film. But of course, any developer that wants to make that work would be. I think with the 2.8 and the workspaces, if there's a workspace for architecture, it's gonna get a lot more attention, and maybe developers can work on more of that because it's a huge market. So it should be very interesting to work on that. What's the difference between the Workbench and Clay? The difference is that the Clay engine will die. The Clay engine is a proof of concept, because when the new OpenGL in Blender was implemented, there was no viewport. There was Cycles was always running, rendering all the time. Remember, like when you go to Cycles, it was always rendering. Then EEVEE didn't exist, Workbench didn't exist, so the Clay engine was basically a quick matcap on top of everything, just to see it, basically just to see something without having all the complexity of shaders and materials and stuff. It was just a easy way to have it there. So that's the Clay engine, and it should go away and be replaced with something with the Workbench engine, but maybe a type of the Workbench engine that could be matcap, or could be like with the for sculpting. So if you're sculpting, this should be the best way to see your mesh, with maybe cavity shaders or something. But basically the Workbench engine is going to cover all the ways that you need to see an object when you're working. What Linux distribution you use? I use Ubuntu GNOME 17.10 from last year, October. Are there any plans to improve the use of Blender as a motion graphics tool? I would love to ditch Cinema 4D. You can ditch Cinema 4D whenever you want. Blender can do it. It just maybe needs a few shortcuts and stuff, or like a way of setting up the things, but you can do it. Just ditch Cinema 4D and you're not gonna miss it. Any plan to integrate text tools in Blender? I don't know the tool. I don't know the add-on. Control I only works when you want exactly the same modifier. Control L when you same modifier stacks though. With multi-object editing, we'll be able to drop modifier at the end of the stack for multiple objects. Oh, yeah, that would be pretty neat. Yeah, should be proposed. Is Blender getting feedback commit from 2D animator for Grease Pencil? Yeah, well, they just made a movie, Hero, right? This is 2D animation. It's animated in if you haven't seen it, just check it out. Google Hero Blender on YouTube, and you will see it. This is made by 2D animators. So that's the whole goal of the Open Movie projects, is to improve the tools by making film. Any chance to get pre-selection highlighting? I don't think so. Oh, so Clay engine will go away when Workbench matures? Yes. During the port of modifiers to 2.8, is there any chance to let the user drag and drop the that's something we want so much. It's high in the list, but it's not easy to drag and drop. But yes, it would be awesome. Will there be support for Oculus or HTC Lives and directly in the viewport? There is some work in progress, I think. And thank you, YT775, for the heart and for saying thanks, because it's been way too late for me to make this. It's already like 1 hour already, past 1 hour. So I think I'm gonna be wrapping this up. I still have to get ready because I'm doing exact same thing now, but I'm gonna do it in Spanish in 1 hour in my YouTube channel. But if you hablas español, you should check it out. Otherwise, I will see you, everybody else, I will see you in 7 days, in 1 week, when we are ready to, and this is when I put I play the music in the background, and get ready your ears, because we're living with style. I will see you all next week. Cheers. Thanks for being around. It's been another week of Blender 2.8 stuff. Keep rocking. Share if you like this. Give it a thumbs up if you want. Yes, please. It will be pretty amazing. Otherwise, I will